When you see this right here on your onions, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. And it's probably not your fault. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope everybody out there is having an awesome day. Today, we're going to do a little garden tour, catch you guys up on what's going on in all 10 of our garden plots. And then towards the end of the video, we're going to talk about onions and specifically why onions bolt. We got a few of our onions bolting, and so we're going to try to explain maybe why that happens. So we took a little break from the videos late last week. The kids were on spring break, so we took a trip up to the North Georgia mountains, had a nice little vacation up there. But when you go on vacation, you get back, it's like, whew, I got a lot to do in these garden plots. There was a lot of growth while we were gone. We had a lot of storms while we were gone, a lot of rain, a lot of wind, but the garden fared pretty well. But all that rain caused things to grow pretty fast. And so when we got back yesterday afternoon, I spent a couple hours out here just weeding and kind of taking care of a lot of weeds that were popping up due to all that rain, trying to get things cleaned up a little bit. And we've got a lot to do this week, and we'll be sure to take you guys along. So we'll start out over here where we've got 2 rows of indeterminate tomatoes, and man, these things are growing fast. Starting to see some blooms on some of these guys right here, and I got to get a trellis up for these this week. So I got to go to Lowe's or Home Depot, get some conduit, and we got to rig our indeterminate tomato trellis. But all the plants are looking nice and healthy. Some of these over here are leaning over a little bit, which tells me I gotta trellis them pretty soon. I did come in here and heal all these plants, pulled some soil up around them before we left on vacation, just to kind of give them some additional support with all that rain and wind we had. I did lose one plant here on this particular hill. I could replace it, but I've got plenty of plants here. I've got 3 or 4 plants per variety, so I think I'm just leave that blank spot there. We got some work to do definitely here in the next week to get these guys supported. And before we left to go on vacation, I also did one particular thing to one of these tomato plants here because I wanted to test something. You may have seen a lot of people in the past talk about burying a fish next to a tomato plant, how it just makes it grow wonderfully. Great fertilizer for the plant and all this stuff. And I've always been a little bit skeptical of that. But a couple weekends ago, went flats fishing with my father-in-law. We kind of got skunked. It was a rough day out there. Caught one speckled trout that was barely legal. I think it was 15 inches or so. Tried to give it away at the boat ramp. Nobody else caught any fish either. I kind of forgot that it was in the cooler in the back of my truck, and probably sat in there a little too long to clean and eat. So I said this would be a great time to test this fish in the hole experiment with these tomatoes. So I had one fish and I buried it beside one of these tomato plants out here. And I'm not going to tell you which plant it is, but I do have it noted, marked down on my spreadsheet of my planting map with these tomatoes here. And we're going to see if it makes any difference or not having that fish buried next to that tomato plant. And next to those indeterminate tomatoes, we've got this decent sized space here that we'll be planting probably in the next couple of weeks. So we had some Balanza clover here. I've cultivated this a couple times, pretty much got rid of the clover for the most part. There's a little bit of stubble out there. So this is where we're going to be planting our glass gem corn pretty soon. Wanted to get my sweet corn planted first and then get this going. So hopefully, you know, depending on what the rain does, we'll try to get this planted soon. And then right behind that plot, we've got this plot that's pretty much ready to plant. This is where we had a cover crop of Bayou kale. I've cultivated this twice and it's pretty much ready to go at this point. But what we're putting in here, I needed to wait on a good stretch of warm weather. We just got done with a cool spell, and so now we should be able to get it planted this week. So in this plot, we're going to be planting zipper peas, probably 2 double rows of those. They like it warm, so that's why I wasn't in a big hurry to plant those. Also probably going to be doing a row of peanuts here. Never successfully grown peanuts, planted them for the first time last year, couldn't really get them to germinate. We're going to try again this year. I was kind of waiting for all the commercial guys around here to start planting peanuts to kind of tell me when I need to plant them. I haven't seen any peanuts being planted yet, but I imagine it's going to happen pretty soon. Over here on the other side of the barn, we've got this small plot here where we've got our cucumbers and squash planted. Now the cucumbers took a little bit of a beating from that storm. Some of them kind of got knocked down a little bit. As you can see there, that guy's kind of laying on the ground. We did transplant these. The new growth on them is looking pretty good. Even got some blooms. Let's see if I can zoom in. Even got a few blooms on some of those. So I may need to come in here and pull a little soil to help kind of stand some of those plants back up. But they're looking pretty good so far and starting to grow really good. These over here on the other side of the trellis actually look a bit better than those on that side. Get some nice growth on these. No tendrils yet, but they're growing fast and they're liking this warm weather out here today. Then we've got our row of summer squash that we direct seeded here. Those have started to come up. I need to come here and thin those out pretty soon. So we've got the Enterprise Yellow Straight Neck and then the Pantheon Costata Romanesca. Got pretty good germination. Gonna have a pretty nice full row there. I think I got one little skip spot there, but we planted them thick. And so by the time these plants get nice and big, it'll look like a full row. And then right behind that little plot, we've got this plot here where I did get our sweet corn planted right before we went on vacation because I knew we were getting some rain. And I was just hoping that we didn't get too much rain where it washed my seeds away. So we got, I think 6, maybe 7 rows planted here in this plot. And as far as I can tell, I don't think my seeds got washed away with all the rain. I can still see kind of the little divot or the lane there where I ran the seeder and planted these seeds. Haven't noticed any of them popping yet, maybe 1 or 2 as I look really close out there. That little cool spell may have slowed the germination a little bit, but it's supposed to be warm these next few days and we should start to see some corn plants popping pretty soon. And I hate that I didn't get to do a video when we planted this corn, but I was kind of in a hurry. We were getting some rain late that afternoon. Me and Titus got out here and planted this stuff in a hurry, got our drip tape laid down, all that good stuff. So we didn't really have time to film it. But once this corn sprouts comes up here, I am planning on doing a video talking more about sweet corn, why we chose the variety that we planted, and a little more detail about growing sweet corn, kind of tips and tricks that we've learned over the years. Over here in the dream garden, we've got a lot going on. We've got our tater plot right here, which looks a little skippy in some places. Some of our taters came up real quick. Some of them were slow to come up. The ones that were slow to come up have caught up with the other ones for the most part. We got a pretty good looking full row right there and right there. We've got some skips in that row there. Maybe all that rain we had caused a few of those to rot. That row right there got a few skips in there. So on the next video or the one after that, we need to heal these guys. I was kind of waiting for those late sprouters to get up a little bit, and they have now. So now we can come in and heal these, pull some dirt around them, and kind of help suppress some weeds in the middle there, keep those potatoes from being exposed to the sun if we get a hard rain. So those are the 4 rows that we got from Wood Prairie. And then over here is our experimental rows we were doing, comparing cut potatoes versus whole potatoes and comparing a straw method to a traditional in-ground method. Now I had pretty high hopes for these tater experiments we're doing here, but for some reason the seed potato stock that we grew ourselves in the fall was really slow to come up, and I think some of them might have rotted before they were able to sprout. Maybe I need to use one of those tricks to kind of force sprouting in the future if we're using our own seed stock. I know you can put them in a bag with some rotten apples, expose them to ethylene gas. Supposedly that can trigger sprouting. Maybe I need to do that in the future. So we may not have as many conclusive results as we wanted, but I think we're going to get 1 or 2 things out of these experiments. So in this first experimental row here, we've got red taters planted. That stake is kind of the division line between the 2 treatments. We've got, I think we planted whole taters right there, and then cut taters right here. I have to check my notes. But anyway, we've got enough plants coming up there. I think we can have some conclusive results there when we do get a yield. we may not be able to compare it, you know, apples to apples, that 15-foot of row length versus this 15-foot of row length. We may need to adjust for the actual amount of plants we have there, but I still think we can get some decent results. Our Kennebecs that we planted from our own seed stock have not come up at all. So probably not going to get any good results there. Actually, I told a story. There's one little plant coming up right there, but I don't think we'll have enough for any conclusive results. But hopefully maybe we get a few Kennebec taters out of the deal. And then on the third row here, where we're comparing straw versus in-ground, these taters underneath the straw have not came through the straw. Maybe the straw was too thick, I don't know. I've just got some wheat straw that's sprouting here. That's all that green you see. Now the German butterballs that were not planted in the straw over here actually finally came up, and they're looking pretty good. And this is one of our favorite varieties to eat, so we'll at least get some of those out of the deal. And kind of bookending this tater plot, we've got some beautiful looking lettuce. This row right here on the end of the plot, we've got this Tropicana leaf lettuce. We've got some Sparks romaine there. We've got this Adriana butterhead lettuce, which is looking really, really good. This Alkindus red butterhead is absolutely beautiful. This is the one we had so much trouble getting it to germinate, but it looks like it's going to be well worth it. That's some beautiful looking lettuce. And then here's that Turkish lettuce, that Yetikule lettuce, and we'll probably harvest that pretty soon, because from what I hear, that stuff can get bitter on you when it gets hot outside. Behind that tater plot, we've got our 2 rows of watermelons here, where we planted our seedless watermelons, plus those pollinizers. These things are kind of creeping along. They're growing. Doesn't look like much, but we've got some growth. Those little babies are probably doubled in size since we put them in the ground. This little cool spells kind of, I won't say stunted them, but just kind of slowed them down a little bit. Looks like all our transplants made it, maybe except for 1 or 2 right in the middle there, but I've got some backups in the greenhouse I can replace those with. So once things warm up here this week, those things should pop pretty good. Then we've got our English peas right here, which are looking absolutely fabulous, especially considering how pitiful they looked after they got bit by that late frost a few weeks ago. They have recovered nicely, just absolutely loaded down with blooms. There's pods forming all over the place. None of the pods are close to being full enough to harvest, but it looks like we're going to have a nice English pea harvest here in a few weeks, and hopefully things will stay cool enough where we can get at least 2 harvests off these guys. I'm probably going to have to run another line of string on my trellis here pretty soon, but I'm super pumped about how these are looking. Then we've got a blank space where our Alibaba watermelons are going to go once they're ready in the greenhouse. And then we've got some spinach here that's pretty much done its thing. This stuff grew like crazy while we were going on vacation. I've already cut it 4 times, maybe 5 times in some spots. It's starting to go to seed, as you can see here. I don't know if it's gotten bitter yet or not. I'll probably try a little bit of it. We might try to get 1 more little harvest off this, and then I'll probably mow it down, take the wheel hoe and kind of chop it and terminate that as best I can. We're not going to till it because this is a no-till plot, but usually with the wheel hoe and that little knife blade, I can terminate it pretty easily. And then we've got our tomato and pepper plot. Still have this blank space right here. I've got a late round of indeterminate tomatoes, some new varieties I wanted to try, or new to us varieties. Probably going to stick those in that space right there. We've got our 2 rows of peppers here, which are looking really, really good considering all the bad weather they've had to deal with. Starting to get some blooms on these bell pepper plants right there at the top, but everything's looking nice and green and healthy on those. Won't be long before we need to set up our Florida weave trellis for those guys. Give them a little support as they start to bloom and put on some small fruits. And then we've got our determinate tomatoes here, which I believe tripled in size in that little amount of time we were going on vacation. Especially some of these over here. And I don't have my planting map in front of me to know which variety is which, but some of these are looking awesome, like those guys right there. So we've got to get our Florida weaver in on these ASAP. We'll probably do that on the next video. We put these posts in place and healed these plants a couple videos ago, and now we need to run our first line of string. Also need to go ahead and get some cages on these Torrangina cherry tomatoes here. 2 of them stayed standing. This one here has fallen over, but we'll get it back stood up, put some straw around it, get a cage around it so we can support those plants. Moving on to the next plot, we've got our pumpkins here, and man, these things are growing really fast. Had hardly any transplant shock with these. They took off really fast. I need to hook the water up, believe it or not, and give these guys some water today. They have really been soaking it up. So we've got our Jade night pumpkins here, and man, these things have just, they were little baby transplants not just even, you know, a week and a half ago, and they have really taken off. And Jade night's looking good. The fairy tale pumpkins aren't quite as big as the Jade night, but they're starting to put on a lot of new growth there, which is always a good sign. And then we've got these giant pumpkins over here, which are growing faster than any of them. You can see they're starting to put on some big leaves there on all those plants along that row. And on the end of this plot, we've got some rutabagas that need to be harvested in the next couple days. Gonna have a nice mess of greens off those and some nice big roots down there. We'll try to show you guys when we do harvest those. And then we've got our celery here, and I know I was way too late putting this stuff in the ground, and the plants look really good, really green and healthy, but I don't know that we're going to get any decent stalk size off of them. However, some of those stalks are big enough to eat, I believe. It's not really heading up like I think celery is supposed to do, and it may get too hot before it does anything else, but I still think we can steal a little bit off of this and salvage something to eat. And then in this plot here, we've got a decent amount of open space where we're going to be planting some flowers as soon as those transplants are ready in the greenhouse. Our curly kale here, I think this variety is called Darkabor, is still hanging in there pretty good. We've still been eating a lot of this, and it seems to be pretty bolt resistant or bolt tolerant. Don't really see any seed heads on that. Still lots of good groceries there, a lot of good production coming off that. Now our lacinato kale here has all bolted for the most part. Our collards also bolted. That's why they're not right there anymore. Took those to the compost pile. So this kale right here, we'll probably pull it up pretty soon. It's all flowering out. And from my experiences the last few years, this type of kale, this curly kale, seems to be a lot more heat tolerant than this lacinato kale here is. Let me know in the comments below if you've experienced the same thing. But if you want kale that's going to grow longer into the warmer months or spring season, I think this curly kale is the way to go. This kale, this dinosaur kale or lacinato kale, is really good stuff. It just doesn't seem to like the warm spring weather as much as this stuff here does. And then on the far end of that plot, we've got all our garlic here. So we've got 4 rows of soft neck garlic that we're trying as an experiment to see if we can get it to grow and make individual cloves down here in the south. The plants are looking pretty good so far. I need to put some more water on this stuff. Even though we've had a lot of rain, this stuff has just been soaking up the water. You almost can't give it enough water. And so I need to hook up the drip, feed that. That's our soft neck. And then we've got 3 rows of elephant garlic here. That's looking pretty good as well. Starting to get some good size on the stalks down there. Some of them are big around as a $1/2, which is what we like to see. Getting a little more variable stalk size or stalk thickness with the soft neck garlic. But I'm pretty hopeful at this point. I think it's looking good. We won't know until we pull it up, but I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing so far. On the elephant garlic, we'll wait to harvest it until it starts forming scapes or seed heads. That's probably at least another month out. For this soft neck, supposedly you're supposed to harvest it when those bottom leaves start dying back, which we haven't noticed happening yet. so we're just kind of keeping a close eye on this. And now, as promised, let's talk about these onions. So of all that stuff I showed you we have growing now, the onions probably took the worst beating with all that wind, but most things are still kicking along pretty good. We'll start over here with these leeks though. So we've got this late row of leeks we planted, this jumper variety. It's kicking along pretty good. We've got our Tadorna leeks here, which some of them look like they might be getting close to being ready to harvest. We want to wait till those stems there get about $50 around, and we're getting close on some of those, so we may do some selective harvesting on some of those pretty soon. We've got all of our short day bulbing onions here, 7 or 8 rows of those. I'll give you a little more info on those in just a second. And if we go down here to the end, we've got our bunching onions, which have gotten really big. I need to pull these, eat these, give these away. I think they're getting close to the end of their road, starting to see some seed heads on some of those, but those parade bunching onions have done really well for us. But back to the bulbing onions. So these first 3 rows here are red onions. We've got a variety called Chianti and a variety called Red Rock. Finally starting to see some good bulbing taking place on those. Those are looking really good. No real signs of any bolting yet on those. And then as far as our yellow sweet onions go, they kind of go in order as this row, or as these rows go along, as far as the performance of them. So we're trialing several different varieties here. This first row here has a variety called DP Sweet, and I think these are my biggest onions. They also look like the ones that are going to need harvesting first. Some of these are starting to look like they're going to fall over. That's an absolute monster right there. That's bigger than a softball. So the DP Sweet is looking like the winner in the clubhouse so far, followed closely by the Sapelo Sweet, which we have right here. Got some nice looking onions forming there. Scoot on over here, we've got our Timon onions, which are a little bit smaller than the Sapelo Sweet. They may end up catching up, but those are looking pretty good. You can see we got some nice onions forming down there. As far as when we're going to harvest these, we'll wait until those plants start to die back or until they fall over. Now it's hard to tell with some of these if they've fallen over because they're ready or if they've fallen over because the wind blew them over. But for the ones that have fallen over, like this one, I don't think they're going to stand back up. So we may come in here shortly and pull some of those that have fallen over. Sometimes they don't ever fall over. Sometimes the plants just start to die back, which looks like maybe what's going to happen with this variety here. They don't fall over. They'll just kind of, you'll start to see some death at the top there, and you can feel that stem there right above the bulb kind of get soft and weak, and you know it's time to pull them and cure them. We're back to the trials here. So our second to last row of short day bulbing onions, we've got this variety called Super X, which wasn't looking that great a couple weeks ago, but starting to make some decent sized bulbs now, so it's coming along. And then we've got our Texas Legend onions in this row, which is probably the smallest of all the varieties that we planted, which is kind of unusual. Usually this variety performs pretty well for us, and we're going to get some decent sized onions out of this row, but not near the size that we're going to get from some of these other varieties. So our onion trial results aren't completely conclusive yet, but they're becoming a little more clear as these onions get closer to maturity. One thing we do have to keep in mind is there are variable maturity dates even within short day onions. Some of them will mature faster than others. So while some varieties look bigger now, the other ones may catch up in a couple weeks. We won't really be able to tell until we pull them all, kind of lay them on the soil there to let them dry in the sun a couple days. Then we can really tell which varieties perform best. Now on the end of this onion plot, we've got a couple of these guys showing up, and we've had several people messaging us lately saying my onions are bolting, what can I do, or what did I do wrong? And the truth of the matter is, when you see this happening, it's probably not anything you did wrong, and there's probably not a whole lot you can do about it. So this right here is something that we really don't want to see with our onions, but it happens. And when it does happen, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You just pull the onion up and eat it. when these things go to seed like this bulb is pretty much done growing. These onions also, when the plant goes to seed, don't store very well. So if you see this happening, go ahead and pull these puppies up and enjoy them. Now typically red onions are a lot more prone to bolt or go to seed than are these yellow sweet onions, but we do see it with these. Some years are worse than others. The red onions seems like it happens every single year, and they usually don't store that well anyway. That's why we pickle a lot of our red onions, because it's a great way to preserve the harvest. They're not going to store that great under the barn, nothing like these guys usually will. So when we see this, it stinks, because we're not going to get the storage potential out of this onion here. And that's one of the main reasons we grow onions, because it's a great storage crop. We can harvest them and they'll stay good under the barn for 3 to 4 months sometimes, and we can just go out there and grab an onion whenever we need it. Now, given the fact that this is an unfortunate event, what do we do? How do we prevent this from happening? Well, I've kind of got my own ideas as to what causes onions to bolt, but I also wanted to look online to see what other people were saying, what some onion experts were saying. And I found this article, I think it was from way back in 2013, that was written by Bruce Frazier over at Dixondale Farms. He's considered an onion expert in my mind. And so I looked at what he was saying about why onions bolt and kind of compared that to my experiences, and I'll share those with you guys. So from my experiences, the number one reason onions bolt is because they experience crazy temperature fluctuations when they get close to maturity. So you don't really have to worry about onions bolting before they actually start bulbing. But once they start this bulbing phase and they're getting close to their maturity date, you start getting crazy swings in weather, hot, really cold, like we've been having, high 70s down to 40 degrees. Back to high 70s. Some of that can throw the onions for a loop. And plants in general, when they get stressed, they want to go to seed. They think, oh, I'm about to die because of these crazy temperatures. I need to go ahead and reproduce. And obviously there's nothing you can do about these crazy swings in the weather. Seems like we've had a lot more of them this year than in past years. Thankfully, I've only noticed a couple of my onions bolting. We may see more of it in the next couple weeks. Hopefully not. But you really can't do anything about it. It's just part of growing onions. You're going to have some that bolt. Some years where the weather is more consistent in the spring, you'll have less of them bolting, and you can have more of them that will store long. In years where you have crazy temperature swings, you just have to pull up the bolted ones and enjoy them while you can. So the crazy temperature swings are the primary reason in my mind, and that was the number one reason Bruce listed in his article as well. But he also listed two other reasons that I haven't really thought about. One of those reasons was loose soil. So he said that if your onions are planted in really, really loose soil where the roots can't really grip into the soil very well, that's going to stress the plant as it gets closer to maturity and cause it to go to seed. And the third reason he mentioned in that article was over-fertilization. Now, I've never considered onions as being something that you can over-fertilize. I've fertilized onions very, very heavily over the years and never felt like they were over-fertilized. But he said that if you do push them too much too early, they'll get closer to their maturity date sooner than they should, and then you start to see some bolting happening. Now, I don't think that's the case with my onions or most people's onions. I think the number one reason, the primary reason, like I said, that onions bolt is just because of the crazy temperature swings as they get closer to maturity. So if you've got onions bolting or going to seed, don't be too hard on yourself. It's probably nothing you did, and there was probably nothing you can do about it. If it's red onions, join the club. It happens to all of us. If it's sweet onions, maybe it just wasn't a good year for onions. Maybe next year will be better for you. Just pull them up like we did this one, take it inside and enjoy it. So I hope you enjoyed the garden tour and the onion bolting discussion. And if you have any additional thoughts or comments on what seems to cause onions to bolt for you, please do share those in the comments below so we can all learn from one another. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to check out our affiliate links below. A lot of great companies that we use in our gardens here at Lazy Dog Farm. Even got some coupon codes for some of those companies so you can take advantage of those discounts. Please do go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com, where we've got recipes, our garden blog, recommended products, Lazy Dog Farm merch, and more. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe, hit that notification button, like and share, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.
Oh, farewell. By the beauty of your life,